Hello, everyone. Thank you for clicking on this video. Today, we are going to be analyzing an article by Cynthia Fraser. The article is Music with the Message in Mind, a Cognitive Response to Background Music and Advertising. So this article is actually not a study that has been done by itself, but rather an article that analyzes a bunch of other studies, past and present, with a conclusion at the end, of course. So let's get to it. So today's goal is understanding how background music influences consumers' learning and memory of brand and message elements in ad. So basically how the consumer retains this information or doesn't, and how music plays a role within that aspect. Early empirical research and marketing focused on comparing ad brand and message recall from ads with and without music. So they documented the consistency of distraction posed by background music, which is kind of surprising because sometimes we think that, music is, it's such a tool for us to use, but at times it can actually be a disadvantage, which we'll get to that today. So today we'll actually examine research comparing multiple music backgrounds, followed by linking a greater distraction with a lack of background if it doesn't really go with the advertisement, if they're not similar. There are a few steps to this. So firstly, Fraser focuses on comparing early models of brand message recall with and without music background, and she reviews them. So this is where comparing them comes in. Next, she researches, documents, and the pre-attentive processing of background sound changing as presented. Thirdly, a review of recent research on brand message recall comparing music backgrounds differing along structural characteristics and frequency of change in backgrounds. So she basically takes early models and recent models and compares how they have changed or might have not changed. Then recent work on music evoked images influenced by Leonard B. Myers. Research on the meaning in music is reviewed. So here we kind of look at the imagery that music can pose to our brains and how they evoke us. And finally, she directs the paper for future research and her suggestions. Multimedia advertisements, they have three primary goals. An advertisement should capture attention. Viewers should process the brand and message. Brand and message should be remembered long-term. Basically, they just want you to remember their brand, what the advertisement did, and they want you to basically be enticed to purchase their product or their services. So Bruner suggests to attract the attention of potential consumers or create a positive brand image, advertisers add background music. And although background music can encourage audiences focus on an advertisement and support a positive brand image, other scholars state that this could be different. So agree to disagree. Olson states that the background music also distracts viewers. It diverts their attention away from brand and message processing, reduces message elaboration, and lowers message recall. We're going to go over a few studies here and just kind of break it down, just so it makes a little bit more sense. So we'll begin with Park and Young, 1986, Music is a Distraction. That's not the title of their paper, it's just what they get at. Early empirical research in marketing focused on comparing of a brand, message, and recalls from ad, with or without musical elements. Park and Young, they compared message recall from a shampoo television commercial with and without background music with lyrics. The background music chosen was a song by Blondie, which is Tide is High, with the lyrics unrelated to the shampoo or message elements. So they found that the music background tended to distract viewers and reduce information processing of the message elements. So since the music didn't really correlate to what was being presented, their study showed that it was actually a distraction rather than a tool. In another study, Sewall and Serrell compared 31 commercials for various products, some with and some without background music. So they state that shoppers at a mall were approached and interviewed while 3 of the commercials played in the background. And in a later interview, again, to see if they had recalled any of their information from the ad, the results suggested a negative impact of music backgrounds on brand recall. However, they said that this impact was not significant. So they actually didn't remember anything from the brand recall. Anand and Sternthal compared thoughts during 3, 5, or 8 ad exposures for a message condition and message sung with piano accompaniment, or a radio ad for Mountain Dew. They found significantly fewer thoughts reported that when the message was sung with accompaniment, so when there was lyrics. This result was taken as evidence that the addition of music distracted people from message processing. Consumers were not able to process the message properly because the lyrics were distracting them. Gorn, Goldberg, Chattopadhyay, and Lidvac, and Tavasoli and Lee ran 2 separate studies where they compare background music with the music services advertisement. They both suggest that music had posed as a distraction rather than enhancement to the advertisement. These 3 early studies are built on the assumption that the addition of music to an ad overtaxes working memory, as Fraser states, making processing of a brand, message, and musical elements difficult. Taken together, this research suggests that elements, either with or without lyrics, unrelated to the brand or message, with the message sung, or with the presence of simply instrumental background music, increases processing demands, distracts, and reduces recall. On the other hand, Kelleris, Cox, and Cox, they were the first to suggest that not all music backgrounds are alike, and to focus on the congruency between the music and the message of the ad. They suggest that if there is harmony and similarity between music and an ad, that it will actually help. So this makes sense for one thing to fit another. They compared multiple music backgrounds, specifically radio advertisements for multiple brands. Music was accompanied by songs thought to be congruent, so similar, with the ad's message, and music thought not to be congruent, not to fit, or no music. So basically, they had 2 groups. One group is that they had music which was congruent with the ad, and one group that was not congruent with the advertisement. However, no differences were found in message recall. However, both brand recall and message recognition were higher when music fit than when it did not. The example used in this paper, stated by Fraser, was using Chinese music in the background for a Chinese restaurant, was more music than using music from a different culture. Next, we will be talking on the preemptive processing of changes in background music. So working on memory and attention are closely linked. Scholars, they offer a critical explanation as to why background music changes influence message recall. They state, and I quote, "Working memory stores incoming information to be understood and integrated before moving into long-term memory. However, working memory does not work in isolation of unrelated information, including unexpected threats that might require a reaction, as the brain pre-attentively screens the surrounding environment for the relevant information. Basically, this means the brain subconsciously accumulates information from the environment. The information is then processed, and the brain filters and processes what is important. In order for scholars to assess how these background music might influence us, they use a tool, and I will try and pronounce it, electroencephalography, which is EEG for short. So using EEG, researchers are able to document detection of changes in background sound. So these little changes, and they can see how our brain is reacting to that. Those signs of detection are observed when background sounds differ from what the brain is expecting. So our brain is kind of wired to be like, okay, we're listening to this, we're going to go off this, and then bam, something new comes in. It triggers something in the brain, and then the consumer is immediately distracted. Kolsik and Jetenschek in 2008 played background music with unexpected harmonies while participants viewed a silent movie with subtitles. So there was a lot going on for the brain there already. Although participants were watching the movie, they responded unconsciously to the surprising chords, and the EEG device, it showed evidence of distraction was observed. This neuroscientific literature provides clear evidence that the processing of non-threatening changes in the background music is obligatory and occurs without awareness. So background sound changes are automatically processed first before the actual visual brand and message stimuli. So the brain is actually responding to what is happening in the background before we're actually noticing what we're seeing visually. These little sounds trigger the brain. Bruner in 1990 identified 3 categories of structural music characteristics that could potentially influence brand message recall. So there might be a suggestion here, a little solution. Pitch or harmony, texture, number and type of instruments, and tempo. Changes in harmonies. Texture and temporal music background characteristics are tools used by composers to convey meaning to audiences and to create a deeper connection. Meyer states that the composer creates score that feature harmonic changes, the exit and entry, and variety of unique instruments to capture listeners' attention by violating expectancies. When expectancies are violated by changing in the music, process of non-musical stimuli, such as brand and message elements, may be disrupted. So this is what we were talking about. If the music does not go with the ad, you're already being distracted. On top of this, if the expectancy of the brain, what we're anticipating to come next, is violated, then we're immediately going to be distracted because a big change has happened. Harmonic changes. Composers often change from one key to another. So this may be done quickly or maybe by introducing unexpected tones from a new key. And this triggers cognitive processing of the unexpected new tones. There's something new going on here for the brain. And when we hear the first few notes of a piece, listeners quickly and sometimes unconsciously identify musical keys and expect to hear notes in that key. We're presented with something and we expect it to be seamless and ongoing. So reaction to notes heard outside a certain scale or key may be automatic and pre-attentive. This can happen even with children as young as 5 years old. So even these little children, they're really, they're aware. So this can create a distraction for the listeners. In the background music with more key modulations, there are potentially more interruptions of message processing and reduced recall. The more hectic a piece is, the more distractions it poses and distracts the consumer. So for textural changes, an instrument's sound is uniquely identified by its timbre. Even untrained listeners, like myself, can easily recognize that notes from a cello can differ from sounds made by a trombone or piano or clarinet. When a background music includes a variety of instruments with distinct timbres, harmonic changes, when those are heard from each separate instrument, they tend to be processed separately because we're not processing everything at the same time. Therefore, the brain must track each of the multiple changing streams. Thus, more timbres potentially increase distractions. And this was actually proven by a study directed by Sloboda in 2005. Temporal influence on change in density. So tempo also governs and controls the rate of distraction from background changes. Essentially, a faster tempo produces denser simulation and more frequent changes. At faster tempos, there are fewer opportunities for brand and message processing, since the processing of the brain is occupied by the background music and changes, so we're focusing completely in a different place. For influence on sound streaming, similar sounds heard in close proximity become associated with common source or streams. Future sounds heard from an identified stream are less distracting because they are similar and common to our memory. Quantifying cognitive responses to music evoked images. Although structures and characteristic of a song or a musical piece affect distractions and brand recall, other musical aspects also influential. Mayer in 1956 and in another study in 1973 refers to meaning that listeners derive from music as either embodied or referential. Essentially, referential meaning refers to associations from music listening contexts, whereas embodied meaning refers to images prompted by structural aspects of the music. For music written to be enjoyed with others or listened to as background during daily routines, composers try and write easy listening homophonic music in which a single instrument, so this is what a simple, easy listening music would be. The definition is in which a single instrument delivers the melody with additional instruments providing harmony. Nothing too complex. Such simple homophonic structure enables referential meaning from associations with the context to emerge. States that when heard again, referential MEIs, which are music evoked images, emerge, prompting memories of the context in which the music was heard earlier, as well as the people who shared the listening experience. Music that we've heard before gives us a connection to past experiences. The example that Fraser actually uses is after hearing Vivaldi's Spring at a wedding, associations would be merged between that melody, the special occasions, the friends and family that are present. That hearing that same song again is likely to prompt images and memories of the wedding, which is the friends and family who were present in the event and everything that was going on. Music that is intended to be listened to in concert hall, it differs from these music that we are comfortable with because the composer's goals are often different. So Fraser states that the music is typically written to provide cues that are more likely to evoke embodied MEIs through polyphonic music, in which the melody is passed from one instrument to another. On the other hand, according to Fraser, in the context of background music and advertisement, a switch from processing of brand and message elements to the processing of MEIs from unexpected background sound creates an attentional postponement effect. So processing of these MEIs occupies attention and delays message processing and consumes the limited time available for refreshing of brand and message associations. The more likely a background song or a piece is to evoke MEIs, the smaller the proportion of processing the time remaining for the message elements. So more interesting music is this likely to be more distracting because our brain wants to focus on that piece that we love so much. If the MEIs evoked by familiar backgrounds are positive, nostalgic memories, audience members may be distracted, evidently, further from processing the brand and message elements as they reminisce on scenes from their past experience. So this reduces the chances of reorientation of going back to the brand message and what is being shown in the advertisement. So if you were to see a picture or an advertisement with your favorite song that you used to have with a ex-partner, you might focus on that song rather than what is being shown on the screen because you want to remember that memory, and that's something that triggers you automatically back to that memory in time. And while the good feelings triggered by referentials MEIs may not sometimes transfer to positive feelings about an advertisement brand, the connection between brand name and message may not occur, and the attended learning from advertisements with a message component would be lost. Background music that evokes referential MEIs is prone to the elaboration and can distract and reduce the processing of brand message elements and their recall, according to Fraser. Music backgrounds and ads create opportunities for new linkages between music and these music evoked images in the advertised brand and message, even if the music is unfamiliar and unrelated to the brand or message. According to Tavasoli and Lee. If brand elements are processed and they're linked to the music, hearing the same music later may actually cue a recall of those brand elements. And with familiar backgrounds, the potential for long-term music cued recall may be even greater. This is because familiar backgrounds are less distracting as changes in the music are anticipated and less surprising. MEIs evoked by familiar backgrounds may simplify later music, cued recall if brand and message associations are linked to an existing network of non-brand associations. Essentially, to summarize that big chunk of information, Fraser states that recent evidence has shown that not all background musics are alike. So we cannot just generalize that all background music is distracting and it doesn't work and it needs to go. Of course not. There's a reason we still use background music for advertisement. Clearly it works. We just need to find the right type of music. Within that right type of music is, the structure of music and how it's made. And Fraser states that these musical characteristics, including key modulations, entry and exit of distinct timbres and tempo, as well as music evoked images, influence the level of distractions created by backgrounds, as well as short and long-term brand message recall as a consequence. So it's not automatically what we might think it is. There are some distractions happening. On the other hand, simpler, familiar homophonic backgrounds that are more likely to evoke referential MEIs are most distracting, but are more easily linked to advertising brand and message elements and better cue later recall. Although in the moment, we are not completely focused on the advertisement and we're remembering that music evoked image. We're remembering something that's happening in our head. Later on, when we re-listen to that song, it's actually gonna make us recall that brand, and multimedia is basically going to get what they want. We're going to remember their advertisements. More complex polyphonic backgrounds are more likely to evoke and embody MEIs. So the more complex a song is, the more likely we are going to remember that image of it. Those with relatively fewer changes in key timbres per beat per minute are less distracting, and reducing short-term recall less, but are less capable of cueing later than long-term recall. Essentially, while there are these different types of music that we have assessed in today's lecture and article, she's saying that we cannot just generalize because she has only gone so far with her research. She cannot just generalize. There is much more research to be done in different types of music and to assess differently, because there are some advertisements out there that when we listen to a song, we automatically think of that advertisement. So thank you so much for listening to my lecture. I hope that you enjoyed it. Thank you for your time.